Welcome to the podcast, folks. Today we're diving deep into a world where theology meets geopolitics, where ancient prophecy fuels very modern political agendas.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these beliefs have not only shaped culture, but have real policy implications.
Absolutely. At its core, we're talking about the kind of eschatological vision that sees a war in Israel as the catalyst for the second coming of Jesus. Yes, a war that some believers, a lot of them actually, think is completely desirable.
Right, it's incredible, isn't it, that millions of American evangelicals, real mainstream folks, view global conflict, especially centered on Israel, as, a necessary trigger for a divine event?
Exactly. And the roots of this idea go way back. Remember the book of Revelation? Written in the first century, filled with imagery like dragons and beasts.
Yep.
But it was a product of its time, a cryptic message aimed at a persecuted early church.
It's like those vivid symbols were addressing the Roman Empire, not setting the stage for modern geopolitical scenarios.
Yeah, but then along came John Nelson Darby. He coined dispensationalism with the notion of our current era being the final dispensation. His ideas basically transformed Revelation into a blueprint for an imminent apocalyptic war, especially in Israel.
And it's crazy how Darby's ideas migrated, right? Through the Scofield Reference Bible, those notes literally seeped into American consciousness. Suddenly, you had millions of readers interpreting biblical texts as a literal map to the end times.
Exactly. And then in the 70s, Hal Lindsey's bestseller, The Late Great Planet Earth, took the idea further. It mixed Cold War tensions with these apocalyptic signals. It was almost like a doomsday recipe where nuclear fears merged with divine prophecy.
It's wild, because Lindsay painted a picture where the chaos of the Cold War was seen as an encouraging sign that the end was near, that the Antichrist was on the rise.
Yeah. And then we can't forget the massive cultural impact of the Left Behind series in the 90s. That series sold over 80 million copies and essentially turned eschatology into a pop culture blockbuster.
And it turned these doomsday ideas into entertainment. It's like they made praying for apocalypse a kind of blockbuster event.
Exactly. And with Israel positioned as the epicenter of the final battle, these narratives turned what might be a distant prophecy into a very tangible political support for aggressive policies toward the Middle East.
So when you hear evangelical leaders, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, John Hagee, Mike Huckabee, talking about blessing those who support Israel and cursing those who don't, it's not just political rhetoric, it's deeply theological.
Right. And that theological stance
Yeah.
isn't simple. It's almost a complete worldview where global events, like a modern war in Israel, are seen as divinely orchestrated signs rather than, say, tragic consequences of human conflict.
Sure, but let me ask, don't you think it's a bit extreme to let prophecy override the sober tasks of governance and pursuit of peace?
That's a fair point. There's a tension here. If you take these prophecies literally, then diplomatic efforts become secondary because, in this view, the chaos is inevitable, even desirable.
Yep.
It's a sort of theological fatalism that might, in effect, undermine peace initiatives.
Exactly. And then you see the impact on American foreign policy. Presidents from Reagan to Trump have, consciously or not, catered to this bloc of voters. For instance, Trump's move of the embassy to Jerusalem wasn't just political. It was seen by many as turning the prophetic clock forward.
Absolutely, and we even saw high-ranking officials like Mike Pompeo referring to God raising Trump for such a time as this. It's almost like a reverberation from those ancient texts, meeting very modern political reality.
But here's something I've always wondered. If these prophecies, as interpreted by some, call for a war that would wipe out 2/3 of the Jews, doesn't that clash with the idea of divine mercy, or the moral teachings in Christianity?
Right. That's a solid critique. It's like, well, if you're saying that most people will perish and only a few will be saved, then you've basically traded compassion for a grim acceptance of mass destruction. This theological exploitation is disturbing.
And yet, sadly, it appears to resonate enough that it shapes big chunks
Yeah,
of policy. The belief that modern Israel's formation, wars, and even moves like the establishment of the Third Temple are divine signals fuels aggressive stances.
yes, and that's not all.
Absolutely.
It even permeates other aspects of culture, influencing conspiracy theories and climate change denial. It's like, why bother solving these urgent problems if, in your view, the world is simply destined to burn?
And that fatalistic perspective essentially justifies inaction as much as any overt political stance. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts.
Exactly. And it's remarkable how these interpretations of Revelation, originally, for many scholars, a politically charged text aimed at the Roman Empire, have morphed into a literal blueprint for the end times. What a transformation, huh?
Indeed, it's like the original symbolic imagery has been repackaged and turned into a rallying cry for modern conflict.
And one cannot ignore the way these ideas impact, well, the broader political landscape. Evangelical support, after all, has a powerful influence on the Republican Party and, by extension, on U.S. foreign policy.
Right. When political leaders court this base, using narratives of divine promise and inevitable war, it really blurs the lines between faith-driven zeal and national strategy.
And here's something to consider. By framing war as, not just inevitable, but even in some sense desirable, these groups shift the discussion from diplomatic resolution to, essentially, a countdown to Armageddon.
That's a bit chilling when you think about it. Sadly, turning peace efforts into something almost heretical in the eyes of the faithful.
Yeah, and it's like, when prophecy becomes policy, there's a risk that the pursuit of peace gets outright abandoned. It's a dangerous shortcut that assumes divine intervention will sort everything
Yep.
out.
And as scholars have critiqued, Revelation was not meant to be a literal prediction of modern events. Rather, a coded message for a specific historical moment.
Exactly. It becomes problematic when a text meant to inspire hope and resistance against oppression is, hijacked to justify conflict. That transformation is, frankly, quite unsettling.
And it shines a light on how interpretations can be manipulated, sometimes intentionally, to serve very contemporary political aims.
Right. So what we see is a merging of faith and politics where the stakes are nothing less than global. It's not simply an abstract interpretation. It has dangerous consequences when it feeds into national agendas.
And that's the core dilemma. How do you balance deeply held religious beliefs with the pragmatic need for peaceful, nuanced diplomacy?
Exactly. It's like, tying your hope for a miraculous salvation to events you can frankly control, like policy decisions and military actions, and that creates an incredibly volatile mix.
Ultimately, acknowledging this mix means rethinking how we approach foreign relations in a world where prophecy, rather than tradition or dialogue, can sometimes dominate the agenda.
Right. It's a wake-up call. If we let these apocalyptic visions drive policy, then we're, trading the pursuit of peace for a certainty of conflict. That, in the end, is a price too high to pay.
Well said. It's an intricate and frankly alarming convergence of theology, politics, and culture, and one that forces us to constantly re-examine the cost of such beliefs.
Absolutely. Thanks for this deep dive into how ancient texts and modern politics can, literally reshape our world.
Thank you. It's a lot to think about, and definitely a conversation worth having.